Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Unvarnished Football. I'm Michael Jackson of the Game Before the Money, and Upton Bell is here as always. Upton, former NFL executive with the Baltimore Colts and New England Patriots. He owned the World Football League's Charlotte Hornets, and his father, Bert Bell, founded the Philadelphia Eagles and was NFL commissioner. And Upton, we're about to head into training camp, and there's a lot of rankings coming out about quarterbacks, a lot of preseason talk about what teams are better. Everything's being played on paper right now.
You know what? You got it right because it's all on paper. It ain't. In some ways, be reality, and in other ways, I think it's unreality. Starting with the quarterbacks.
So who do you see going into the season? I think within the past couple of years, there's quite a bit of time where unquestionably Patrick Mahomes was number one or maybe number two. If you're going to pick Josh Allen number one, is Mahomes with his injury? Is that affecting? How much do you think that'll affect him? What do you see in that situation? And who would you rank number one right now?
Number one, I would have Josh Allen. Josh Allen to me is the closest thing to Superman, assuming he doesn't get hurt one of these days, which will happen. At like 6'5", 250, the guy is unbelievable. He has an arm the likes I've never seen, and you can compare him to all the great arms in history. But the other part is, imagine trying to bring down a guy 250 pounds running straight at you. I mean, he's one of the greatest weapons I've ever seen in the NFL as combination. Now, is his team good enough to get them to the Super Bowl, which they've never been? I have my doubts about that, but to me, he's the unquestioned number one. Number two, they have listed Patrick Mahomes. I don't get it. Not only is he coming off a very serious injury, and remains to be seen what he can do and whether he'll still be running like he did in the past, but I just think even before the injury, even though they've been in 2 or 3 Super Bowls, I don't think he was the same player last year before he got hurt. So I wouldn't rate him the number two quarterback. The guy, to me, all along, if it wasn't for injuries and such a horrible offensive line, that I think the next best player to me is Joe Burrow, and I would say, if you could cut out, which you can't, the injuries and how bad his offensive line was and how bad that defense was at Cincinnati, he would be my pick as 1A right next to Allen. I think he's that good. He has a great arm. He stands in the pocket. He's able to run. Actually before the injuries, everything is left. And he is a highly intelligent football player, quarterback. To me, you send all the plays in you want. He would be one of the few players that I would say he can do it on his own. Keep sending in the damn plays. So that's where I see it among the top 2 or 3 players. I mean, there are other people like Lamar Jackson is on the list at number 4 or 5. I don't know about Jackson. I've always questioned, even though he has a strong arm, always questioned him as a thrower. There's no question he is great as a runner, but he's never really done it, Michael. So that's where we are with him. Then you have Dak Prescott. I don't get it with him. I do not get it with him. And listen, he has come a long way from a guy who's essentially was a free agent, low draft choice by Dallas, but he to me is way overrated. Then you get into the people later on that, including Drake May, who again I think has great ability, run, pass, can do practically everything. But yet, when he ran into the playoffs and finally in the Super Bowl, he did not have a very good playoff. I think he is still somebody that is really an experiment that could be absolutely great. We'll see with him. But of the quarterbacks that they've listed, the top 7 or 8, I'm in somewhat agreement. But the top couple of quarterbacks, I'm really impressed with Burrow. I'm really always been impressed with Josh Allen. I have my questions about what is going to happen, especially with the situation in Kansas City. I don't think that they're really. I have some questions about them being a playoff team or being a low playoff team.
And these quarterback rankings that you're referring to, that was Sports Illustrated, is that right?
You got ESPN. You've got everybody's coming out with them now. It almost looks like somebody rubber stamped them for everybody.
Somebody typed it into AI, and everybody's using the same thing. So for me, I'm gonna say two things about this, and one, I'm a results dude. I'm totally. I look at results, and Patrick Mahomes has produced the best results. Yes, I know he's been injured. The greats, they adjust their game to where they're at in their career. We look at, I know it's a baseball reference, but Justin Verlander, he has adjusted his game multiple times, getting new pitches. There was a time, around 2000, you can look at the stats, 2007, 2008, shortly after the Tigers had won their first pennant. And the league got started to figure him out, and he developed a new pitch, and then he became dominant again. With Mahomes' injury, kind of like with Peyton Manning. When Peyton Manning had his injury, he wasn't quite the same Peyton Manning, and he adjusted his game. You look at Super Bowl 50, he was more of a spiritual leader than he was a passer. And Mahomes can become that. I think Mahomes knows the game well enough and is committed to the game enough. I'm not sure if this injury is going to slow him down in terms of his effectiveness. To me, if I'm gonna pick my own starting quarterback, he's gonna be my top pick along with Josh Allen. Now, the other guy I would pick, and I don't know why people haven't talked about, the other guy I'm going to pick over Burrow and Lamar Jackson and whoever else is Matthew Stafford. I mean, Matt Stafford has proven himself over and over again that he's going to have a big season and he's going to put your team near the top of the standings, likely into the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs with Matt Stafford, you got a pretty good shot.
Well, he's on that list, and he's high on that list, and maybe some people are discounting it because he's now 37, 38 years old. I do agree. I've always thought, even when he was at Detroit and they were losing all the time, I always thought he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he was sensational last year. And actually, I thought 2 out of 3 times that they should have beaten Seattle, that they were a better team in Seattle, and he makes them that good. But there's no question he's in the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks. I just moved him down a little bit because of age and his situation. But and remember, he was injured last year too, to a degree. But there's no question that you bring up a good point about him. He has size, he has everything. He's very athletic, great arm, and is very, very accurate. And again, as I said, I thought that they should have won 2 out of the 3 games and actually should have won the playoff game. And they would have been. I think if they played the Patriots, that they would have beaten the Patriots by more than a couple of touchdowns. I thought they were that good and that well coached. So I think it's great that you bring him up because he has everything. And once he got with a good team and a much better coaching staff, I thought he was really good. Now, another guy that we have not mentioned is Herbert from well, I always call them San Diego because I still think they're San Diego. Uh, from the L.A. Wanderers, as I call as
Dion's
they
favorite
call,
team, Dion and the
yeah,
Belmonts' favorite team. They call me the
yeah,
Wanderer.
yeah. I mean, but he has everything, and I thought when he first came up that he was going to be one of the young great quarterbacks, and he showed so much promise. But again, last year his problem was not so much that he wasn't having a great year, and he was up to the playoffs against the Patriots, but he had no offensive line. I mean, literally, you might as well have had rent-a-tackles for what happened, and he took a terrible beating. So we'll see how he recovers. He's got a better offensive coordinator this year. Hopefully, there'll be a return of better offensive tackles, better offensive line, and so he could take off.
Perhaps I want to bring up, and this is why I brought up Mahomes and Stafford, and why I would take them as probably my top 2, with Josh Allen right up there. But it's knowledge of the game that matters as much, if not more, than talent. That's how Peyton Manning was able to win Super Bowl 50. That's how John Elway was able to win back-to-back Super Bowls when his physical talents weren't at where they were in, let's say, 86, 87, during the prime of his career. Knowledge of the game. I remember reading an interview with Troy Vincent while he was still playing. Troy Vincent, who's now very high up in the league, but he was a very good defensive back. And he had about a 10-plus year career. And he said when he came in, Don Shula was his head coach, and Don said, okay, there's going to be a point where your physical talents aren't going to take you as far anymore because the game starts to take that away from you, getting beat up every week. So you got to learn the game, and you got to learn how to play the game. And I think Mahomes and Stafford, they know the game much better than everybody else. I would trust them to make smart and correct and best decisions throughout a game consistently than I would trust anybody else that we've talked about. Allen, Herbert, Burrow, and anybody else. I don't think there are really any other quarterbacks I can think of at that level right now. Maybe Aaron Rodgers knows the game pretty well. That's how he's still playing. Aaron Rodgers does not have the physical tools that Aaron Rodgers had in 2010. Nowhere near. But he knows the game so well. And that's going to allow him to be a starter. Now, how effective he's going to be, he's not going to be as effective as he once was because he doesn't have the physical tools to make the throws. But he knows the game well, and that's going to keep him at least at a competitive level.
That's true about him. But here's a thought that I have. The thought that I have is that the game is so quick, so fast, moves so fast today that unfortunately what you say, I'm not sure that it's totally true about today's game. I think experience is really important, particularly with a quarterback. Uh, I don't like the idea if you have a really smart quarterback that every play has to be called for him. I find that stupid. I don't like it. Uh, but I think what has happened is it's such a physical, fast moving game today that you can have all the experience you want, particularly as a quarterback. But I think that's negated if your team, in the case of the Rams, they're going to have a great defense, especially if Aaron Donald returns. They have a potent offense. They have everything going for them. I don't think so with Kansas City, and I think that is going to affect Mahomes, no matter how much moxie, how much intelligence, um, um, how much experience he's accumulated over the years, and it's been great. He's won some really big games that I didn't think they should have won. But
Yeah, I
uh,
agree with he's more than likely going to be limited by the talent around him, and that is true. That can only go so far, but I think he'll do more with less. He's one of those guys that can do more with less. Now, the AFC West, I mean that's becoming a tougher division with as the Broncos become better and better.
well, the Broncos. Well, let's face it. If their quarterback doesn't get knocked out, and they have to play the game with a second string Patriots cast off quarterback, do you think the Patriots would have advanced? Do you think they would have beaten Denver? I don't think so.
I don't think
Uh,
so either. Not
uh,
in Denver, and not at the way Bo Nix was playing.
well, not only that, they barely won anyway. I mean, the Denver's defense kept them in the game. It just so many mistakes offensively.
Well, and
That
coaching and coaching mistakes. You know, let's take the points. Take the points, Peyton. Take the points, Sean. He knew that. He wouldn't have made that decision
and
back
you know
when he
what
was a Saints coach. He wouldn't have made that
right
decision 10 years ago.
that really surprised me. They got down there. I think it was on their first possession, but they got down there very early, and he knew he was playing with a quarterback that 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 wasn't very good. And as you say, I screamed at the set, take the goddamn 3 points. You get yourself out on top. I mean, anything could have happened in that game. I never understood that when you go. Why would such a smart coach like Sean Payton go into a game knowing that he's lost his quarterback, who was having a hell of a year, and now he's going to play with a guy that the Patriots also were familiar with, and knew his quirks and some of the dumb things that he's done in the past, and not take the points every chance you get. But even with all of that, they still could have won that game. So when you look at the Patriots advancing, and then they get to Seattle in the Super Bowl. I know we're jumping around, but they get into the Super Bowl and they play a very dominant Seattle team. And again, if Seattle's quarterback was a better quarterback, I don't care what they say, was a better quarterback, it wouldn't have even been close. It could have been 3 touchdowns. It could have been more. So you see what the great ifs are in the league, particularly today, and it was always to a degree a quarterback-driven league, but more so today. If you don't have the quarterback, you're going nowhere. You're in Palookaville.
Now we've got some young quarterbacks coming out of Palookaville, or hoping to take their teams out of Palookaville, if you will. Bo Nix is one of them. I like Bo Nix. I rate him really high. I think that he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the next couple of years. I think on my list of surprises in the NFC this year, I think Tyler Shuck has a really good chance of having a breakout year with the Saints. I like what the Saints have been doing. And I think, and I know we're going to disagree on this, but I watched 3 or 4 of his games last year. I think if Shedeur Sanders gets a chance to play in Cleveland, I like how he stays in the pocket. I like how he can throw accurately downfield. I saw him make throws that I'm not going to name names, but at least half of the league couldn't have made. I think Shedeur Sanders could have a breakout season if given the chance. If they don't start Deshaun Watson, that's a whole nother topic in itself.
Oh my God! I mean, I call him Mr. Massage. He's been on more. He's been on more massage tables than anybody. Given the biggest and worst contract in history, and believe me, if Shedeur Sanders will never make it if Jimmy Haslam has his way, because he paid him the most. He paid him the most ridiculous contract in NFL history, and I guarantee you, he's going to want to. He's going to tell that coach, this is a guy that has to play.
Who, in your opinion, getting back to the younger quarterbacks, though, I chose Nix, I chose Shuck, and I chose Sanders. Who, in your opinion, if you had 3 young quarterbacks from which to choose, who would you choose?
Well, I would say, and I've always been a great admirer of his. I know he started off kind of poorly, and there's still questions about him. But the guy that I think has tremendous ability to run and throw is Trevor Lawrence. I just, for whatever reason, it looked like he might have gotten over the hump last year. But with Jacksonville, he had terrible coaching in the beginning, got injured. But at 6'6", I don't know, 230, 240, the guy is a tremendous athlete. He's made some poor decisions, but I think he kind of was straightened out a little bit last year. If anybody was one of those young quarterbacks to emerge, to me, it would be Trevor Lawrence.
I like Trevor Lawrence a lot. I think he's one of those guys that learns from his mistakes. I think he continues to learn the game. I think he's committed to learning the game. I think he has a really good chance to continue to have success. I also think there's some quarterbacks, and I'm going to use some historical names here. The first guy that comes to my mind is Jim Hart. Okay, Jim Hart was a really good quarterback. All right, Jim Everett too. Okay, really, really good quarterbacks, but their playoff ceiling isn't. And maybe C.J. Stroud fits into this too. I don't see them leading a team to a championship game. I do think Trevor Lawrence could win an AFC title. I don't know if he could win a Super Bowl. I think it would depend on the circumstances. It wouldn't surprise me if he did, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't end up being one of those guys who is lucky to get past the divisional round and get a chance to play for the Super Bowl.
Well, I will say this. I mean, in the same breath of mentioning Trevor Lawrence, is that I think Drake May of the Patriots really has the potential to do it all. And now that he's got recalcitrant ex-Eagle A.J. Brown, Mr. Trick or Treat himself, He has a legitimate receiver. He didn't have great receivers last year, and I think it's somewhat held him back. But in my mind, uh, we'll see what happens with Mike Vrabel with all the off-season stuff. But with a guy like Vrabel, if he's able to concentrate this year on being the coach he was last year, and and Drake May having, I think will be even a better year with a good receiver, a game breaker. Maybe we'll see with AJ Brown, and with an offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, who really knows. I think McDaniels, in my mind, he was never really a head coach, but he might be among the best offensive coordinators the game has ever known. I think this could be, and it's a big if. I think this could be a real breakout year for Drake May. So,
Yeah.
of all the younger guys, uh, and having that type of offensive coordinator, I think that Drake May would probably, now that we talk about Lawrence, would probably be, assuming that things go right, would be my number one pick for a breakout year.
And that's a great point. I've been a Drake May fan. Those of you who listened to the game before the money when it was a national radio show on Sports Map radio, you'll remember me talking about Drake May quite a bit while he was in college, and me playing up Drake May as a player to watch over the future and to prepare for his NFL career. I like what I've seen from Drake May so far. I don't know if he is superstar talent. I just I haven't seen I haven't seen that. I've seen him. To me, he's a very good quarterback. I don't I don't know about, is he top tier yet. I'd have to see that. I'd have to see. I don't know how committed he is to the entire game. It's easy. It's easiest in football. And football is never easy, but it's easiest when you're riding a high to perform well. Now, in the famous words of Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until they get
So they get
punched in
hit.
the until they get punched in the face. So the more adversity May faces, I'll be interested to see how May does when the Patriots aren't kind of a sleeper team, and when everybody's preparing for the Patriots as one of their biggest games of the year. I'd be interested in seeing how, now that Drake May is on everybody's radar, how he's going to play. I'd be
Well,
really
that
interested in that.
yeah,
That's my question mark with Drake May.
well, the I can tell you that they're going to be a better team this year, but I also can tell you that looking at their schedule, especially the first four games, that it's going to be damn tough. Unlike last year, where they were able to sneak up on teams and actually beat teams, they had the easiest schedule I think in the NFL last year. We'll see what happens this year, and you're right. We'll see what he's made of. I just like the guy's makeup. I think that he has not only the right attitude, but he picks up things quickly. So we'll see what happens this year. But he could have one of those breakout years. I think talent wise, he has as much talent as any quarterback I've seen. And the other thing is, and he probably took off too much instead of doing a check down last year and dumping it off to the backs or short receiver, is that basically he had the tendency to run a lot. He's a very good runner. The problem is, as you know, when you run a lot, particularly him, he got concussions. And as we know, that's the greatest danger to any football player, particularly a quarterback.
Yeah, just ask Roger Staubach,
Yeah.
which
No, that's
that caused his retirement. So going into the season, and to just close out this topic, for me, Bo Nix, I trust to be able to adjust to success because I watched him in college. I have an All-American vote. I voted for him All-American 2 years in a row. I thought he was the best college quarterback 2 years in a row, and I thought that was going to translate to pro ball because everything I saw about Bo Nix, it was what I considered a positive check mark, and he's continued that into the NFL. Tyler Shuck, I wanted to show some love to because I think the Saints are an up-and-coming team. And Shedeur Sanders, I'm telling you, everything that I have seen are the hallmarks of a really great quarterback. If you watch him, and I'm saying, watch this year, if he gets to play, watch his footwork in the pocket. Watch it when what he does when the pressure comes down. He doesn't get the happy feet. He doesn't get the uncertainty. He stands in the pocket and he throws it. So
just remember something though about him, and I agree with everything you say. Just remember something about this. He was playing when they put him in. He was playing. They weren't playing for a playoff spot, and it's different to me. If you're playing for something, they had nothing to lose. I mean, when he got in there, it was after the ball was over.
Fair enough.
That you can look pretty damn good, and I'm not saying he doesn't have physical talent. You can do a lot of things, and people will go ooh and ah when you're in there, and there's no pressure. Now he has pressure to perform because he wants to be the starting quarterback, but it's a completely different thing. That's why I'm always leery of any quarterback, particularly the quarterbacks, that finish out the season and they look like people say, boy, he's really going to be good for next year. So we'll see. But I understand what you see, which are the physical gifts.
You talked earlier about Dak Prescott, and I was a longtime Dak Prescott fan. And another quarterback I think is in a similar position is Jordan Love, who, how much further can they take their teams? When do you think, and your experience as a general manager and working for the Colts, and when is it time to cut ties with a quarterback and just say, look, they've hit their ceiling? And I think those two guys are two guys who have. Now, I might be embarrassed at the end of this season and, after some big success that they have. But to me, Jordan Love and Dak Prescott, both of them, and yeah, those two, they've hit a ceiling. I don't see them taking their teams any further than they have.
I don't either. Particularly Jordan Love, which I have never understood him. I know he had a great playoff game against Dallas. There we go with Dallas again tomorrow.
Against Dak Prescott, right? So yeah, it's like, okay.
They do, but here's the difference, I think, too. If we were talking about, let's say, even a 26-team league, if we were talking about, what it used to be, NFL, AFL, that type of thing. But because we're talking about a 32-league team, a league, and we're talking about a situation where, in my opinion, 16 of them, you could lose 16 teams tomorrow and still have a pretty good NFL. But basically, teams are going to hang on to quarterbacks longer because what have they got? I mean, you've got so many bad teams. You've got maybe iffy teams. Now let's take, and I know we're running overtime here, but let's take the case of the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams, who we haven't mentioned yet. And I think he is the ultimate trick or treat quarterback. Brought him back in a couple of really dramatic national games by throwing the ball up essentially for grabs in some ways, and the receiver makes a great catch, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a playoff team, and a lot of predictions for him this year. So a lot of people, including me, thought he wasn't quite a bust for the last couple of years, but also thought this is that was his third year, but also think that well, where are they going with these people? But what are you going to do if you and I are sitting here and we're trying to make a decision on any of these people, including Jordan Love or Dak Prescott? What are you going to do if you say, okay, we're giving up on them, so we'll look to draft a quarterback and develop one? You're starting all over again, but also you're in a league where all of these different teams, they're not going anywhere.
All right, we're going to shift topics to close out. I want to make everybody aware there's a Jim Thorpe documentary on Netflix, and our friend John Eisenberg is in it. And it's great to see something on Jim Thorpe. And I thought it was pretty well done. It wasn't great in my opinion, but I was really glad to see something out there about Jim Thorpe, because I think a lot of younger sports fans might not know how great he was, and how for a very, very long time he was the undisputed greatest athlete in American history. And if you ask people like me, he still is.
I can attest to that. I, to me, there is no other. Even people like I'll be walking down the street and somebody will stop me and ask me a question about football or this or that, and I always mention Jim Thorpe, probably the greatest all around athlete ever. Baseball, football, and particularly the Olympics, where he did an unbelievable job of winning the decathlon and pentathlon. The famous quote that most people remember: "Thanks, King." King gave called him the greatest, the greatest athlete in the world. Thanks, King. I mean, people know the name. They might not know a damn thing about him. It's like if you say today, even today, you say Marilyn Monroe, everybody knows the name. And I think the same way as you say with Jim Thorpe. It's unbelievable. He was the most dominant kind of personality in America. But anyway, go ahead with your story. So
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about a story. Your father, Burt Bell, founder of the Philadelphia Eagles, apparently played against Jim Thorpe. There's evidence that the two of them met on the gridiron.
well, Bob Lyons, in his book on my father's life called On Any Given Sunday, A Life of Burt Bell, Bob Lyons, who was one of the top writers at the Associated Press in Philadelphia and a stickler for accuracy. And I didn't know the full story. I remember talking to you during the week, earlier in the week, and saying, I believe that my father, Jim Thorpe, was so famous and such an incredible player, and actually was the first commissioner, not for a long time, of the NFL, the founding of it in Canton, at, at, of the Canton Bulldogs, and then went on to have an incredible career in actually everything. But I thought that originally the story was, and handed down to me by different people, that Burt Bell, while in college, always wanted to play against Jim Thorpe, who had then turned pro, and that like college players in the past, at that during that era, they would play under an assumed name and they would get paid money, and then they come right back and play for their college team, and especially if they want to play against Jim Thorpe. In this case, a whole league was formed, as Lyons talks about it in his book. A whole league was formed because Red Grange, who was in a salary dispute with George Hallis. Does it sound familiar? How many guys in a dispute with Hallis over money? Uh, he wouldn't do it, so he kind of formed his own league, and it was called the AFL, like the American Football League, many years later.
Yes.
And for a year, that that league existed, and one of the teams in the league was called the Philadelphia Quakers. This is pre-Eagles and everything else like that. My father was one of the coaches of the team, but he always wanted to play against Thorpe. So, in the only appearance of his professional career as a player, he signed and played for one game against Jim Thorpe. And then after that game was over, he never played another game as a pro. Now, he was the quarterback that led the University of Pennsylvania to the Rose Bowl, and I think it was 1917, and actually threw the first pass in Rose Bowl history. He was a pretty good quarterback in college. I doubt that he would have been one in the pros, even though they threw less, passes in those days, a lot less passes. But it just showed you the pull of Jim Thorpe. Everybody either wanted to play against him or know him. He was a towering figure. And so my father signed a contract, played one game, and that was it.
All right, and I think the name of that documentary is Lit by Lightning. You want to check that out. And Jim Thorpe, still great that people are still honoring him and remembering him even to this day.
What it's really sad is what happened to the rest of his life. In fact, I was watching a movie the other day. I get Turner Classic Movies, and I remember Burt Lancaster portrayed him in Jim Thorpe All American for Warner Brothers, and the movie was somewhat of a hit. But Thorpe ended up the end of his life kind of begging, and actually ended up an extra in some Hollywood movies. And I saw one of the movies that he was an extra in, and it wasn't a movie about you know the cavalry and Indians or stuff like that, but
He
it was
was an
kind of
extra. He was an extra in King Kong.
that's correct.
There's a trivia question for you. So Jim Thorpe, King Kong of American sports to this day. All right, everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of Unvarnished Football. We'll be back next week. We're going to talk about training camp. We're going to look at the teams going into training camp. Upton's going to share some great memories of his time as an NFL executive.
When it used to be at training camps, when it really meant something.
All right, everybody, have a great week, and we'll be back next Thursday. Thanks for listening to Unvarnished Football. Don't forget us to visit unvarnishedfootball.com.